You remember that time way back at TwitchCon when I was trying to interview a Pantheon developer, but we had to reschedule because we just kept getting interrupted?
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance.
Well, today's the day we're not going to get interrupted anymore. I've got my Pantheon shirt on. Let's do it! Alright, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bazgrim, and today is a very exciting day because we're going to learn more about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And to help us with that, I'm joined by a very special guest and a very good source of information about Pantheon. That's Corey LeFever of Visionary Realms. Corey, we did it. We finally found a time. We finally found a time after TwitchCon that our schedules aligned, the stars have aligned, and now we can finally dig into it. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your patience. I know it's been a bit of a back and forth, holidays and craziness of doing pre-alpha and the road ahead. It's been quite a full schedule. So thank you very much for your patience too.
No, definitely worth it. So many fans of Pantheon know you as Ceythos, but for those that may not know, please just tell us a little bit about what it is you do at Visionary Realms.
Yeah, so I'm a senior game designer. Pretty much, any aspect of design that needs help with, I kind of pitch in. Mostly systems related. Right now, my primary focus is crafting, harvesting, and NPC encounter design. Cool.
So Corey posted a couple brief articles on the crafting system in the Pantheon newsletter over the past several months, and so if you're interested and haven't already, I highly suggest that you go read those first to go get a basic understanding of the crafting system. You can just pause this video, go watch those. I'll provide links in the description, so that can kind of give you some basic information, because hopefully today we're going to try to expand upon those articles. So Corey, first, before we really get into that, just give us a little bit of an idea about why crafting in Pantheon is exciting or maybe different from other games.
Yeah, so we're taking more of an approach where we want to look at crafting as a persona experience, where you can take on the role of a crafter and have that be your fantasy if that's what you choose. Like, if that's what brings you to the game and you want to just craft, we want to give a fairly in-depth, immersive, experience. A lot of games today seem to be more focused on crafting as like a means to an end, where either you're making hundreds or thousands of items just to get to a perceived end game, and to make a handful of items there occasionally for friends or whatever. We want the journey to be just as meaningful as the end. So, that's all going to be obviously a bit subjective, but we want you to be able to come in and just craft if that's what your heart's content is. We also want to provide some opportunities to have crafters more heavily influence the economy of the world. Not really quite ready to go too in depth on that just yet, but the kind of broad view of that is that we're going to have opportunities for players to do crafting writs. And based on how those play out, you might see some goods trickle in around the world. So yeah, more on that to come.
Cool. So let's start off with talking about the professions that will be in the game. I know we've got the alchemist, the blacksmith, woodworker, outfitter, provisioner, stonemason, and scribe. Right? Did I get them all?
You did. You got them all.
Excellent. So can you tell us about the specializations within those professions that will be available?
Yeah. So blacksmith, pretty easy, giveaway there. You'll be focused mainly on whether you're going to be like doing armor or weapons, the higher up you go. Outfitting, you're either going to be focused eventually on tailoring or leatherworking, so cloth or leather. Alchemy, you'll either be focused on potions or poisons eventually. Carpenters, we suspect, will be either bowyer or woodworking. Little subtle differences there. A lot of that kind of depends on where we go long term. There's some opportunities there that if player housing or boats come in we're still kind of expanding that out, but loosely that's what we're looking at right now for carpenters. The stonemasons, they will be doing jewel crafting or sculpting, which is primarily going to be like glass, making like relics or idols, things out of clay. Scribes, they're going to be doing possibly like spell research and like item inscription. So whether that's helping with maybe improved abilities or rare like crafted abilities for adventuring, or item inscription, basically like etching into things, whether that's like etching into tablets or providing some kind of like a magical pattern for a tailor to kind of imbue some magic into it. Provisioning, pretty straightforward. That's going to be food and drink. So you'll be either like a chef or a brewer eventually. And that's not to say that there's not some overlap on the journey. So even if I get to level 50 as a provisioner that's focused on brewing, I may still have some opportunities at that perceived end game to do a little bit of baking should I desire to.
Cool. So I think most of those, I think you covered most of those. Did the Sculptor, though? You mentioned the Sculptor. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about what the Sculptor might do? Because that one sounds unusual to me. Yeah,
for sure. So sculpting, we kind of see as being, again, like glass focused, or being able to make molds. So like if I'm a blacksmith, I might go to a sculptor that has some really crazy like rare enchanted mold to kind of help me make a really great piece of armor, or a great like maybe it's like an armor segment, or it's a a weapon blade or head. We're still kind of figuring out a little bit of the nuance with that, like exactly what comes out of what thing, but broadly we would like to see them kind of be a bit of like a feeder type profession. So a lot of what they do is consumable and assists other professions. Mm-hmm. As far as their finished products, we kind of see them fitting like making relics or sigils, things to kind of tie in with multicolored mana accumulation, perhaps, possibly augmenting family lines and abilities and stuff. We'll see how it all plays out, but loosely that's where we would like to go.
Awesome. That's very, very exciting. So you mentioned the alchemist also that might have an ability to like make toxins and stuff. So by toxins, do you mean potions that you could even like throw at people to do damage to them, or something that you apply to a weapon so that the weapon deals more damage? Or what do toxins do?
Yes. Actually, the answer is potentially all of those things. It'd be really great to be able to lob, like a potion or a poison rather at friends or allies to get an effect. In the case of, we're talking about poison specifically here, but being able to lob something that maybe has like a poison cloud that it emits when it hits the ground, or being able to apply different types of toxins to your weapons, whether that's, melee or ranged, like coating your arrow tips in poison or dagger blades. Probably wouldn't see it so much with blunt weapons. That might be a little...
Probably just drip off. Right?
Yeah. But no, like the sky's kind of the limit. I think being able to have all those sort of categories makes a lot of sense for our game. Nice.
So speaking of rogues, and in the rogue class reveal, it said that in addition to crafting their own quote-unquote concoctions, rogues will also be able to craft their own devices. So does that mean that there will be some like profession that's only available to rogues that allow them to craft traps, or does that even fit into the crafting system at all?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a bit of a misnomer to think of it as creating or crafting those things. You do make them, so I understand where the terminologies kind of overlap. It's more like ability based. So the idea there is that you're, the MacGyver rogue, you've got some spare parts, and maybe you're crafting like a trap, or you're putting together a, and again, I'm using crafting here. You're forming these things. This is like an ability of the class and less about a profession track that you would be engaging in. There might be some opportunities to have a little bit of overlap there. Maybe if you're really skilled as sculptor or blacksmith, maybe you get a small bonus to perhaps make a stronger version of that under some circumstances. But by and large, that's probably more of an ability-driven thing and less a true profession track.
Cool. That sounds cool. I'm sure all the rogues out there are drooling.
Yeah, I'm really eager to see that stuff, see what they come up with, and all the fun directions we could take that.
Nice. So, are there any aspects of crafting that might be limited by, like, race or class?
No, I don't really see that as something that we want to pursue. It's a very open world. We want to encourage players to explore and kind of go off rails a bit, maybe where they want to do some oddball things. A good case in point might be, referring back to sculpting earlier, the dark mirror might be exceptionally good at particular types of glass because they live underwater and that doesn't rust. So as a non-dark mirror sculptor, I might want to learn some of their techniques or some of their recipes. In order to do that, depending on what race I've chosen and my actions in the world, I may have an easier or harder time doing that. But certainly, if you want to earn the faction to go work with a particular culture that does things a certain way, we want those avenues to be open and accessible. So choosing a thing kind of sets you on a path, whether it's a race or a class, and it definitely kind of locks you into role in the class, perspective. But in terms of how that overlaps with crafting, we want you to be able to kind of pick and choose what's important to you and go learn that thing.
I think that's awesome. But that being the case, how will you ensure that crafting doesn't make other classes less valuable or unique if anybody can maybe craft an item that gives them like an ability that another class has?
Yeah. In the case of being able to make items that have abilities for other classes, we're going to be very careful to not try and do that. Like, we wouldn't say give Shaman a, Spirited Wolf or movement speed buff that's like 25% move speed. Let's just pull some numbers out here. And then, likewise give a potion maker the ability to make a 25% move speed buff and have them overlap, like fight with one another for design space.
Yeah.
If we were to do something like that, it would be where neither one would necessarily replace the other, but they might stack with each other to a degree. So you could make a move speed potion, and you still want Spirit of a Wolf because the two play together, not because one replaces the other. Right. That will be, though, it's really good that you asked this, and it's I'm sure a lot of people out there want to know about that. We don't really want crafting to take the place of, another thing. We want it to augment it. We want it to be able to give you that economy of choice by crafting, so you can choose, how do I better my experience, not how do I replace my experience.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because I think that's really important. So,
Indeed.
We've heard that characters will be limited to only one profession and one associated specialization. Can you kind of explain how you came to that decision?
Yeah, just looking at the nature of the game to begin with looking at the adventuring side of things, where you have your class, you have your role, this is the space in the world, this is what you provide, this is part of your social contract, like what you bring to the table and what you share with other people. We really wanted to try and mirror the crafting experience to that as much as possible, so they play nice with each other, and to kind of show that we're taking seriously, as a crafter, this is the thing that I provide. I will readily admit, though, this is one of the things that I've probably seen the most kind of pushback on in my reading of the forums and seeing over the past few months people's feedback about this. It's something we'll be looking at closely, though, and considering, maybe it turns out on paper this looks really good, and the general direction you want to go with that feels good, but maybe in actuality it's too punitive. We'll see.
Okay, fair enough. So, because there are certainly some people that they want to experience everything that the game has to offer, and they want to try every profession. I
get that. Yeah.
So now, if you do go the route, let's just say hypothetically, you do continue down the route of you have one profession and one specialization. What would you suggest to those people that want to try every profession?
Yeah. Conversely, like the really cool opportunity I think there is that like as someone who likes to experience the world and might be limited, you could look at it as like, well, I chose this particular race and this particular profession, and it started me in this, this like kind of local culture. Whether it's like I'm a thrown fast human, and I decided I'm going to be a blacksmith. At character creation, I decided I was going to be a rogue. Maybe I've picked up a little bit of adventuring along the way just by virtue of traveling around and doing some stuff, but I've been focused on blacksmithing through the lens of a thrown fast human. I might later go and decide, well, I've progressed far enough in my blacksmithing. I want access to particular types of molds to make, better weapon heads or blades, or I need to, have particular molds for armor plating. I'm going to make a sculptor. Okay, well, maybe I decide I'm going to play an ogre for something kind of different. And it kind of gives this whole like aspect of exploration and taking you down another path. You might find, I really like their culture. I maybe wouldn't have gravitated towards that. Or maybe you decide you really like the human experience, start to finish, so you continue to make humans. But there's some real opportunities there for players to explore and kind of play around, I think. So
cool.
Having that might push people in directions they didn't expect and find things, more enjoyable maybe than they anticipated.
Yeah, definitely. Now, would there be a way, though, that if they start going down a path of a profession and they just decide that, it's not for them and they want to change professions on that character, would they be able to do that?
Yeah, we've already put in some groundwork to allow players to be able to swap professions or swap specializations if they so choose. Now, what that exactly looks like, we're still working out the nuance of, like, I was, max skill level in this profession and I'm swapping professions. How much of those skills they retain is still being worked out, but there is a path to being able to swap should you choose. We also recognize that, like, hey, people sometimes come and go. Some people maybe play really hardcore for like 3 months. They're in a guild, they're really active, and then they take a break for a few months while they're waiting for the next expansion or whatever. They come back, maybe the guild paradigm shifted for whatever reason, and they're short on a particular profession. People may want to swap professions then to just kind of fulfill that need for their guild. We certainly want to be able to provide that should people want to.
Cool. So I know you mentioned how crafting will kind of mirror the adventure side of progression. I think that's really interesting. But because just as some people they just want to play the game and they might not really care about crafting all that much and they just want to adventure. Conversely, there are some people that they want to advance their crafting skill without adventuring. There's both ends of that spectrum. So for those people that they're all about crafting and they don't want to adventure, will they be able to do that?
Yeah, certainly. That's kind of back to the early part of the interview that we were talking about crafting as a persona. That's something we want to allow players to be able to do. If you want to just come and you just want to craft, you can certainly do that. That's the path we're wanting to provide to players. If you don't want to do adventuring at all, by any means, just go out and craft your heart's content.
Excellent.
If you want to do nothing but harvest, you could potentially do that. The people that are going to get the most out of it, like the most out of Pantheon, I think are going to do probably a bit of everything. So
interesting. So if crafting really does mirror adventuring to that degree, does that mean that each trade skill will have a maximum level of 50, or would the max level of profession be in the hundreds, like I think most we're used to with most games?
There's a bit of a distinction there. So you will have skills, like you'll have your as a blacksmith, you could potentially if we pinpoint 50 as the end game level for the base game, you would have a certain max skill based on that. Like we would have, every so many levels I can gain, 5 skill points or whatever. You will have a skill track and you will have an experience track. Your skills, obviously influence how well you do the thing and a couple other behind the scenes things, but your experience is reflective of that. We want to mirror that as much as possible, that if I can get to level 50 in adventuring, we want you to get to level 50 separately in crafting, if you choose.
Interesting. So would you say then that like the goal is for it to take roughly the same amount of time and effort to reach max level in crafting as it would to reach max character level?
Yeah, that would be the desired goal, is to have them take roughly about the same amount of effort, same amount of time. Absolutely.
Cool. Now, will players be able to like gain titles for their crafting achievements or like that, like they would for adventure achievements?
Yeah, if we have adventuring achievements, it will definitely follow that we'll have crafting achievements and possibly even harvesting achievements too.
Cool.
Yeah, anything that you can do adventuring, we want to be able to do crafting. Like we want to be serious about. We are an adventuring game first, like that is our core game, but we are serious about our crafting and harvesting, going on that journey too.
Cool. Excellent. So when you do get to these higher crafting levels and these recipes, I assume, start to require more rare materials or even higher quantities of materials, how do you plan on keeping it from getting too like tedious and repetitive?
It's a fair question. And obviously I think this will be a little subjective, like people's mileage is going to vary. We just have to do our best to try and make the, I think, core gameplay experience, like the act of crafting, fun and engaging enough that players are going to want to go to the level 50 experience. In adventuring, we kind of see that as you're going through the sort of like peaks and valleys of getting from level 1 to end game, your repertoire goes wide. Like at some point, you have a lot of horizontal growth as much as you have upward growth. And I think that's kind of where we see some really neat opportunities for crafting too, is that because it's largely, like, one of its big purposes is providing an economy of choice, being able to, like, I have a need that isn't met by these other things, let me go find a crafter to kind of fit this specific situation, or provide me this specific piece of gear for this content type that I'm choosing. What's a good example? I'm fighting some NPCs maybe that are really, maybe they take extra damage from like fire sources. So I'm going to go find a fire enchant from an inscriptionist to put in my weapon and take that with me to go fight those NPCs. That's like a horizontal growth option. Having those, kind of little nuggets, those opportunities for players to provide a niche thing, I think is what is going to help maybe take some of the tedium out of it, like having the choice, but the actual act of like gathering materials and using said materials, really kind of taking a lot of the bore work out of that's going to just come down to is the like core crafting action and stuff. Does that feel good enough to keep people hooked?
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's a vast improvement over some games, where they're like, okay, I need this material for this recipe, but it only drops 1 in every 1,000 times that I harvest this node, so I'm just going to stand here at this node and mine it over and over and over again until I get it, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. A certain amount of chase is always going to be involved. Like there are probably going to be some rare opportunities where you might have to farm something repeatedly, whether that's killing a mob or whether it's skinning a mob or whether that's, fishing up a really rare fish. As long as I think there's those little carrots along the way to kind of encourage you to keep doing it, and it's not just, I literally needed to do this 1,000 times to only get one good thing out of it. It's a fine balance, and again, I think it is very subjective, but this will be a place where we'll be heavily looking at people's feedback and their thoughts and feelings about, like, have we hit a good point? Is this engaging to begin with, irregardless of the rewards, and do the rewards feel meaningful enough? And yeah, we'll definitely be looking to our VIPs and everyone kind of in the early test sessions to kind of help us hit those benchmarks.
Cool. So speaking of harvesting, I think it was in the most recent newsletter kind of crafting update that you put out that it said that all harvesting abilities will be available to all players. Does that mean it's like free for all? They can level them up, all of them, as they please, or will there be any sort of like restrictions on how those are leveled up?
Yeah, sorry, there was a little bit of ambiguity there on my part. Yeah, harvesters will be able to pick up whatever they want. So if you want to do mining, skinning, and woodcutting in an afternoon, you can certainly go do that. Like, nodes in our game are going to be a little less, I think, populist than people maybe are, more accustomed to, I would say, with like more recent games. There's nothing wrong with that. Just we also want to put a heavy reliance on salvaging as a skill use. So, it doesn't make sense to kind of litter the world with, nodes and being able to just run the same loop of nodes every 5 minutes for hours on end to get the materials you need. With things being a little more scarce, we want players to be able to, I see a node, I want to go get that. I didn't pick that skill, I can't go get that. That feels kind of bad, given our desire to kind of make things a little bit more rare, to kind of keep the supply and demand kind of in balance a bit there, thinking, economy-wise. We want that like moment of like, I just went to a really new place, and look, there's like roots over here that I can go pick for some fibers to, maybe make some threads or make some cloth. There's mushrooms around this next corner that I could potentially pick up to make a toxin or to sell to somebody who wants to make a toxin. We want those things to feel good instead of like, I chose this other thing, I can't interact with that.
Yeah, that's good. The scarcity of nodes was actually going to be my next question, so nailed it. So since you mentioned salvaging though, how does that kind of tie into your profession, if at all? Like, for example, like would a blacksmith be better at salvaging items or salvaging items from armor than like a provisioner would be, for example?
Yeah, we're kind of loosely playing around with that right now. Again, there's a fine balance to be struck there. We don't want it to be so punitive that like this combination of things always is going to be better than this other combination of things. But if as a blacksmith I have a certain skill, a percentage of that might feed into allowing me to roll a little bit higher on a table to get certain rewards back from items. The example might be, as a provisioner, I go to the forge and I'm going to salvage, these bronze breastplates I've been accumulating all day. I might have a slightly lower likelihood to get components back. Like instead of getting armor plating or armor chain segments back from salvaging, I might get ruined scraps of bronze. Whereas the blacksmith might have a slightly higher chance to like, okay, I'm still getting ruined bronze back from this that I can like reforge down into bronze ingots, but they might also have a higher chance to get, I got a bronze plate back, or I got a section of bronze chain back in addition to those other scraps.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So, kind of shifting gears just a little bit. When I was, because I've been wanting to ask you this so bad, because when I was demoing the game at TwitchCon, I came across a very interesting quest NPC on a bridge in Thronefast, and I actually talked about this a little bit more in depth when I was on the Voice of Terminus show after TwitchCon. But I wanted to talk to you about this too, and you'll see why in a second. Because basically, the NPC was a merchant that was making a delivery, but his cart broke down, his wheel broke, you could even see it lying on the ground next to him, etc., etc. And he said that I could take the bag of seed he was delivering to the farm for him, or, and this is where it ties into you, I could craft a new wagon wheel for him so that he can complete his delivery. And I thought that was so interesting that you could choose between the adventure option or the crafting option to complete the same task 2 different ways. The question is, can we expect this to be a common theme in quests in Pantheon?
As far as whether that's going to be a common theme, that's a little, I think, tricky at this point to answer. We are kind of putting more of an emphasis on like quest quality over quest quantity. So I think we would try to leverage opportunities like that, certainly where they make sense and where we have the scope to do it meaningfully. That first quest you saw there was a little bit of an exploration of that. We'll see how it plays out, but I certainly think, like, as someone, back to my earlier point about someone who engages with everything might get more out of the game. The broader you go horizontally with the systems, whether that's perception, crafting, adventuring, or any other that we add to the game, like, certainly I think having those hooks in places would be core to what we're trying to do. Having that like having NPCs recognize, like, hey, you might be doing this thing, or you have done this thing. This now opens up an additional or optional path to kind of a similar result. Like, yeah, let's do it. I love, anytime we can leverage that, like, let's put it in where it makes sense.
Cool. So, out of curiosity, does that mean that, like, that wagon wheel that recipe would only be for that quest, or would that, might you be able to craft that wagon wheel that would have other purposes as well, like, not related to that quest?
That's a little tricky to answer, I think, at this point. I think depending on how we handle, potentially doing like vehicles or mounts in future updates or what that looks like, I'd have a little bit better answer for you on that. I'm not trying to be cagey here or anything, but it's just, we have our own internal list of things that we would love to do.
Right.
Things that we, whether that's launch or post-launch or, a couple expansions deep. I think if we had an opportunity to like make a wheel that like, maybe you could hang it up in your house as decoration, or maybe you could make your own wheels for your own carts at some point.
Yeah.
I think it's really great to be able to provide that. I can't say with certainty, crystal ball if I had one.
Yeah, that's fair. I figured that was kind of reaching a little bit, but I was just curious. But anyway.
Most cases, like the initial answer there would be that we would, they would probably just be for that quest for the time being.
Okay.
But
all right.
Long term, who knows?
Fair enough. So, but would there be quests that like absolutely require crafting? Like there's no option. Like I think the first example that comes to mind would be like the Kaldane Prayer Shawl quest series in EQ, where it's like that is a crafting quest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I certainly think we're going to have crafting quests that exist on their own thing. If we're going to provide a, as closely as we can mirrored to adventuring experience, I think it makes sense that adventuring has its own quests, perception has its own quests, crafting certainly, I think, fits that bill too.
Cool. Excellent. That's good to hear.
I think one place you'll really see that kind of come into play is like learning another culture's recipes. So as an outsider, let's say I'm a gnome and I want to learn how to craft cold dark steel like the dwarves do. Mm-hmm. That might be a, like base cold dark armor or cold dark weapons may require a quest chain to unlock that, get the faction necessary to kind of learn some of the more advanced recipes. And then, who knows, there might be like really rare versions of that also require a kind of off-rails experience, like maybe even playing into perception. Like, now you're going to learn how to make ancient cold dark metal goods. And you have to piece it together through, a globe spanning, I'm going to go look at dwarf outposts and ruins and monuments and things, kind of piece together the information I need to be able to hit those inspiration points and learn how to do, forgotten or exotic recipes.
Excellent. I like it. So, before we wrap up, I just kind of wanted to change the gears yet one more time and run a couple quick ideas by you, just to see what you think, if you don't mind. Some of these are kind of like selfish ideas that I had that I just kind of want to see what you think. Yeah. All right, so what do you think about crafting special like armor or equipment for mounts, like horse armor?
Yeah, I certainly think if we do get to a point where we're able to do a mount system and do it meaningfully, I think that includes making your own goods, whether that's like horseshoes or barding or saddlebags or, some kind of, I don't know, like potion to augment their performance or something short term. Certainly, I think that has a place at the table if we have a mount system.
Sweet. Will there be any type of like specific crafting storages that will allow you to hold on to, I'm sure, the thousands of crafting materials that people will collect?
No, absolutely not. You have a limited inventory, and no, I'm just. So we've got provisioners and carpenters that can make potentially bags and boxes. Blacksmiths maybe make lock boxes, like metal ones. I think that it makes sense that we would have opportunities for you to not only craft those things to store them, but just in general, we don't want the challenge of crafting to be to figure out like how you're managing your inventory. You want to try and remove, as I think many barriers make sense there.
Definitely. Cool. So this is actually something that I've seen a lot on the forums, and there are a lot of people that are really wondering this. Will there be any type of team harvesting or group harvesting mechanics?
Short term, I don't see that. I think initially everything's going to be fairly contested, and it's first come, first serve. That plays more to the economy side of things, like wanting to keep supply demand in check. Because if you start having like nodes are rare, we're only going to travel as a group to get 6 times the results we might have got from that node. You're introducing 6 times, like 600% more things into the economy. Long term, do we do that? Maybe. Like I see the case being made for that. Like I understand the impetus and the want to have like it's a group shared experience game. Why wouldn't that translate to that?
Yeah, exactly.
I see the argument for that. Short term, though, I want to see how the economy plays out and see how that feels before deciding hard yes or no on group harvesting.
So does that mean that nodes will be contested then? Like, will there be any sort of like lockout or anything on nodes?
No, there won't be any lockouts. No, I don't see a point in that. Like it's it's open world. You want to be able to see things and engage with them. I think as much as possible. So having a 10-minute cooldown between harvesting kind of just seems a little arbitrary.
Right, but they will be like first come first serve. So if somebody gets to a node first and they harvest it, you won't be able to then go up and get that same node.
Correct.
Okay.
So where that kind of gets interesting though too, like if you're in a dungeon, let's say, like we're fighting the Black Rose, miners deep in Hunter Cave, and they've got copper nodes there that I'm after. If I'm following a group in and they're not partaking in those nodes, I could come in behind them and pick them to my heart's content to a degree. Or if I'm again trying to get the most out of the experience and I'm adventuring and harvesting as someone in a group fighting those NPCs, I provide myself a path to get those. So through the PvE content on the adventuring side, I provide myself a path to the harvesting, if that makes sense. Like things aren't going to be just out like where you can run a zone freely to grab nodes to your heart's content. There's going to be opportunities with NPC groups and like wandering NPCs and things that are going to get in your way. So clever and crafty players might find a way to kind of either piggyback with groups to get the stuff they need, or they will be a part of those groups to get the things that they need.
Cool. All right, that sounds good. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you feel about like crafting competitions? Like maybe like an NPC in a city would sanction like a bake-off or like a fishing tournament or something between players.
I think that's great. Any place we can kind of have opportunities for that, I think would be really awesome. Showcase like, hey, who can make the most amount of pies in this amount of time, or who can make who can catch the biggest fish in this period of time. Mm-hmm. Category like who can catch the biggest meatball in the next 2 hours. But, yeah, let's do it.
Excellent.
I think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of fun.
Awesome. I love it. All right, I'll quit while I'm ahead on those. But lastly, just as a reminder, I want to make sure we're clear that crafting will be available to test during alpha, correct?
That is the current projection. Just given the scope of our team, we're small and hungry and scrappy. That is the goal, but as things arise in the testing process, that may end up being slightly delayed. But we want to get that to players' hands as soon as possible.
Excellent. Well, I for one am looking forward to it.
As am I.
Excellent. Well, that's all I have for today. But Corey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I know you've been, like I said, really busy, and there's always just a lot of people that are looking for any new morsel of information that they can about Pantheon. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to reach out, and thanks to everyone for their support and interest in what we're doing. And I look forward to seeing more of your feedback about what we've discussed here and the road ahead. And yeah, I just can't wait to get this into you guys' hands as soon as possible.
Sweet. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to stay in the loop with all the latest Pantheon coverage, make sure you check that description below because I'm going to include all the links to my social media so that you can follow me and stay up to date. If you learned something from this interview, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel because there's probably going to be some more interviews just like this one coming down the pipeline soon, and you certainly won't want to miss them, in addition to some other cool stuff. So thank you so much for watching yet again, and we will see you next time. Oh, hello.
Guest doggo, sorry.
Special guest. Nice. What's her name?
This is Arthas. We just adopted him about 4 months ago from the local shelter. Oh, thank you.
Nice.
He's a Boston Terrier, we think, pug mix.
Nice.
Really full of life and energy. Constant source of joy.
Awesome.